Hello, everybody. And if there's anybody there watching us live, this is DigitalLiederSalon with me, Edward Rushton.
And me, Simon Valfish.
And we're doing the show live again today, like last week. So we're very keen to have lots of viewers live to also chip in. You can comment on the live chat on the YouTube channel. Anyway, but before I don't know what I'm talking about, let's just get straight into business, which is what we're talking about today, namely a song by the Czech composer Viktor Ullmann from his songbook After Hafis, which is a cycle of 4 songs that he wrote, Liederbuch des Hafis. Thank you, Simon, for putting that up, in 1940. Now, Simon, over to you for a bit to talk about who Viktor Ullmann is or was, and then we'll talk about the music a bit.
Great, thanks, Edward. This is our second live Digital Leader Salon, and it's quite fun. But as you can tell, you can see now all the bits that we edit out when we do our our non-live version. And just to say that we're really thrilled that for your attention and your support, and you can always support Digital Leader Salon by going to paypal.me/Simon Valfish and put in your reference Digital Leader Salon, and we will make sure to share your generous donation between us, and we're really grateful for that. So every Tuesday at this time, 6 p.m. in the UK or 7 p.m. in Europe, we will be here chatting about some of our favorite songs, usually songs that we've recorded. And here we go. So we're talking about Viktor Ullmann today, and it's taken a while for me to get round to this somehow, because there's so much to say, isn't there, Edward, really, not only about the composer, but also about his music and his choice, the choice of songs that we put on our CD, which we recorded for Nimbus Records in 2016. In 1921, and called Gesänge des Orients, and the title of the CD comes from some songs by Richard Strauss, which we spoke about, I think, in a previous episode. So Viktor Ullmann, who you can see on the bottom of the screen there now, born in 1898 in the Austro-Hungarian Empire. So it's quite hard for us to imagine what that even is, but if you think of Franz Kafka, if you think of Gustav Mahler, they were all of the same sort of ilk. So these are, this is in today's Czech Republic. And just like Kafka and Mahler, Viktor Ullmann was born into a very assimilated Jewish family. So his parents would have been forced or strongly encouraged to convert to Christianity in order to be able to enter any profession, and his father was a colonel in the Austro-Hungarian army in the First World War. And Viktor Ullmann himself joined the army in the First World War and fought in Italy. And after the war, he went to study in Vienna, the University of Vienna, and he studied law, and was a very gifted pianist as well, and was very, very into Arnold Schoenberg, and he studied with Arnold Schoenberg, and in quite soon after the law studies started, he moved and he gave up law and he concentrated on composition and piano. And he went to Prague at that point and studied with Zemlinsky, Alexander von Zemlinsky. So there's some really interesting influences already there, Schoenberg and Zemlinsky, in the young Viktor Ullmann's sort of musical world. And in Prague, he then went into conducting and became the chief conductor of the New German Theatre, now the Prague State Opera. And interestingly, I read recently that his appointment was actually terminated quite soon after he was appointed in 1928, because his choices of repertoire, for instance, some Strauss operas, were considered too racy and a little bit too advanced for the local tastes of Prague at that time. But it's worth mentioning that Prague, at this point in the 20s, 30s, and well, just before the 40s, was really a cultural epicenter in Europe. So much was happening in Prague, so not just in music, but in literature and arts. And as many of you know, that Viktor Ullmann was then forced into the concentration camp ghetto Theresienstadt, or Terezin, which is very close to Prague. And he was there for 2 years and then was ultimately murdered in Auschwitz in October 1944. But these songs that we are going to talk about today were written before his Terezin time. So, but it is worth mentioning that in Terezin, he had a lot of, he was very lucky, if you can call it that, because he was allowed to do a lot of writing and composing, and he also started a Studio für Neue Musik, and there was a huge amount of cultural, I mean, it was a buzz with cultural concerts, lectures, theatre pieces, original works being made. I mean, it was completely unusual in this respect, and the Nazis allowed certain things to happen. And people were somehow, in many ways, more forward-thinking, more advanced in terms of art and music, locked up in the ghetto of Terezin than on the outside, where art was being suppressed and Aryanized, if you can call it that. I mean, just recently we were talking about Arnold Rosé, who was the leader of the Vienna Philharmonic, and for 55 or 56 years, and then unceremoniously chucked out after the Anschluss. And he was not only chucked out from being the leader of this orchestra, but he was also not allowed to play Beethoven. You know, so this sort of disgusting quasi ownership of what would be called as German music. So what I'm saying is that in Terezin there was a lot of advanced art and music happening that wasn't happening on the outside, but unfortunately most of the artists and musicians and composers, along with hundreds of thousands of other prisoners from Terezin, my great-great-grandmother included, died in Terezin or in other camps around. But that's for another discussion, to go in more detail about that. But let's talk about now these Hafizlieder that were written actually in Prague in 1940, so 2 years before his arrest. And whilst he was still writing and still relatively free, although that time, I think, Czech Republic was not yet, Czechoslovakia was not yet occupied, I'm not sure. Edward, do you want to talk us through a little bit of the songs? And I'm going to have a little bit, I'm going to read through some of these comments. And do keep writing comments. But bear in mind that if we read them whilst we're talking, we might get a little bit distracted. So, but do write some questions, and at some point towards the end, in about 15-20 minutes, we will address any questions that you have, and be really glad to get your feedback. Okay, Edward.
Okay, so yes, these 4 songs written to poems by Hafiz. And Hafiz was a Persian poet from the 14th century. And you might ask why a modern, very modernistic Czech German composer is interested in setting ancient poetry like this. And the answer is because they all were. There was a great upsurge in interest in exotic poetry at that time. And this is the theme of our CD that Simon mentioned earlier, Gesänge des Orients, which translates as Songs of the Orient. And it's all composers from that time, from the beginning of the 20th century to the middle of the 20th century, setting German translations or Czech translations of the poetry of Hafiz and of ancient Chinese poetry. And most of the translations, at least the German ones, were done by a chap called Hans Bethge. Now, we talked about this, as Simon said, in an earlier episode when we talked about the Strauss songs, Gesänge des Orients. We talked about a song called Huldigung. I don't know if you remember us talking about that, which is a really great masochistic love song. So all those composers were obsessed with Hans Bethge's German translations of ancient and exotic poetry. There were translations of Turkish poetry by Bethge, of Chinese poetry, of Japanese poetry, and of Hafiz. In fact, on the CD, in the group of Strauss songs, Gesänge des Orients, there's a setting of this same poem. And Bethge called it Schwung, which is very hard to translate, actually. Ullmann actually cut out that title and just called it In Praise of Wine, Lob des Weines. But the original title in Hans Bethge's translation is actually Schwung, which means something like, I don't know, ecstasy or
frenzy.
Frenzy, yeah, frenzy. There's a translation of it called frenzy, I think. Now, the other, just briefly mention the other three poems that Ullmann said in this brief cycle, Liederbuch des Hafiz, Hafiz Songbook. It's a very concise cycle. The first one is called Vorausbestimmung, and he talks about that everything has been preordained in life. Some people are preordained to do this or that, but I, Hafiz, am preordained to drink. My fate is to spend time in bars, drinking wine and ogling the barmaid. And there's nothing I can do about it because that is Allah's wish for me. That Allah has preordained that that's my life. So that's.
Is it worth jumping in here quickly? You've mentioned Allah. That Hafiz, the famous Persian poet, was a Sufism, which is not that I'm in any way an expert at all, but what I understand is that Sufism is very much about enjoying the sort of the gorgeous lusciousness of love and alcohol and partying, and it's quite sensual.
Dancing as well.
And dancing, and it's not. It's.
Yeah, I'll talk about that in a minute. I want to get onto that. I mean, I'm no expert either, but just to summarize the other songs again. Betrunken, yet again. So Hafiz has been drinking, and he's talking to his friend. He's in a really bad way. He sees his own shadow dancing wildly against the wall, and he talks to his friend. He says, you always tell me not to get drunk, and you say it's bad for me, and now I realize you're right. The third song, Unwiderstehliche Schönheit, what a beautiful title that is. Irresistible Beauty is a love song, and he's talking to a beautiful woman about how beautiful she is. And then we have Lob des Weines here, In Praise of Wine. Now, the thing about Sufism, as I understand it, and I must say I have very little understanding of this, is that, yes, the poetry is about alcohol and women, so about erotic love and drinking, and the composers actually took that literally and wrote songs that sound as if they are drinking songs and love songs. But I think there's another level to it, as I understand it, that all these things, all these the sensual aspects of life that the poetry is praising, and that is so present in Sufism, the dancing, the erotic elements, the alcoholism, there are sort of a metaphor for religious ecstasy. So it's a way of getting nearer to God. It's a way of approaching connection with Allah is through the senses, through enjoying life to the full in a sensual way. And this goes to excess. So I don't know if anyone knows about Sufi rituals when they do these very long kind of chanting and dancing rituals, and they kind of really get quite intense. It sort of it whirls and whirls and builds up to quite sort of an ecstatic physical praise of God, and that's what the poems are about. But what's great about them is that Hafiz on one level, and that's the level that the composers obviously enjoyed so much, and that we as interpreters and that you as listeners enjoy so much, is that it's very, very earthy. It's very, very connected to the sensual part of the poetry. Now, I've just had thank you, Catherine Butler, for telling me that I'm right about this metaphorical thing. Yes, so I'm glad that I'm not embarrassing myself too much here. The sensual is a metaphor for religious ecstasy. Now, having dealt with that, I would actually, I think it's important to feel that our composers are very Central European composers working with German translations of this very distant poetry. The poetry is distant. It's been, you know, the poetry is taken from the 14th century in Persian. It's a long time ago, a long way away linguistically, a very, very distant sort of poetry, and it's about religious a way of worshipping God that is extremely foreign to Central European sensibilities in the early 20th century. So what our friends Ullmann and Strauss and all their colleagues picked up on was this sensual aspect. They're going to write a drinking song, and they're also very influenced, of course, by what Hugo Wolf did when he set poems by Goethe, which were paraphrases of half his poems from that Goethe wrote in his Westöstlicher Divan. There were lots of drinking songs in Goethe's collection as well that Wolf set as just completely wild, drunken romps. And so that's what we get here. So Ullmann, he's, I mean, I think there is something that happens towards the end of the song, which I'll play for you in a minute. Simon's told me that I should actually play some music for you, otherwise it's just chat. It does whirl upwards, spirals upwards in a kind of wild dance towards the end. So you do get this feeling of ascending to some kind of heavenly ecstasy at the end of the song. But it starts with this very firm, this affirmation. Gebt meinen Becher, give me my beaker. Let me just paraphrase the poem for you. It's a very short poem, just in three strophes. Give me my goblet. You see how the goblet überstrahlt die blasse Lampe der Vernunft. It is brighter than the pale lamp of reason. So sensuality trumps reason. So wie die Sonne die Gestirne überstrahlt. In the same way that the sun is brighter than the boring stars. Second verse. Gebt meinen Becher, give me my goblet. Sämtliche Gebete meines Breviers will ich vergessen. Alle Suren des Korans stürzt sich in den Wald. So give me my beaker, and I'm going to forget all my prayers. I'm going to chuck my prayer book into the wine, and all of the verses of the Quran are going to drown. They're going to get drowned in wine. Third verse, gebt meinen Becher, and this is where it gets ecstatic. Und Gesang erschalle und dringe zu den tanzenden Sphären auf. So song will sound and forge a path upwards to the dancing spheres with a huge, mit mächtigem Schwung, with a powerful frenzy, a Schwung or kind of updraft or something. Ich bin der Herr der Welt. I am the Lord of the world. So it ends with this kind of hubristic statement through wine, through getting drunk, or through whatever that means in terms of Sufism. I become, as it were, God. I am that close to approaching God that I become Lord of the world. So Hafiz is actually, I mean, from our point of view, and we're all very scared about kind of offending people. And I mean, there was a time kind of 10 years ago, 20 years ago when, you know, we were all very scared about Islamic terrorism and very kind of dogmatic forms of Islam. And associating wine and dance and
mysticism.
with Islam was kind of really taboo. And the Sufism, I think, is a kind of the third and very minority sort of branch of Islam, was, of course, extremely dangerous to practice Sufism in countries where the Taliban, or whatever they were called, these extreme terrorist groups were in charge, because dancing was obviously forbidden. But now we can see that Hafiz was saying, from our point of view, quite daring things. I mean, when I was looking at these songs for the first time, I thought, he's talking about tearing up his Quran and throwing it into his wine goblet. You know, are we actually even allowed to say things like that? You know, are we allowed to sing these songs? Okay, I did promise you that I would play some music.
Great, Edward. It's great. It's wonderful what you're saying.
All right, here we go. So,
you want me to sing something?
Yeah, why don't we try it? Like,
first?
it'll be a mess, but why don't we just try and sing?
Okay, it's going to be a total mess. So, but we do encourage you to listen to our actual recorded version of this.
I think the delay isn't quite as bad as it is on Zoom, actually, on this.
Let's do our classic 3, 2, 1 and see what it is. Okay, ready? Okay, 3, 2, 1. Yeah, so it's kind of a bad delay. Never mind.
All right, here we go. Anyway, never mind. Let's do
Go for it.
I'll count down 3, 2, 1 into the song. 3, 2, 1.
Die Gestirne überstrahlt. Gebt meinen Körper ein Gebet, eines Gebet. Ich vergesse alles Wort des Vormanns, hört sich in den Wein. Gebt meinen Becher und des Morgens alle und tanze ich bin der Herr der Welt.
I think you killed your computer, Edward. Is it all right?
I died or something.
Did you create an earthquake?
I can't hear you at the moment. I just got to resurrect on my equipment here.
It was very dramatic, Edward.
Hi, I'm back.
Come in, Herzogenbuchsee, come in. Berlin calling, Berlin calling.
Yeah, the computer fell off the piano. Maybe I was playing a bit too loudly. I don't know if any of that was together at all, but that's some idea of the character of this song. It's all a bit loud, it's all a bit high, it's all a bit crazy, a bit drunk maybe. Yeah.
Do you want to just, whilst we're at it and we've got that ringing in our ears, just give a little taste of the Richard Strauss version of the same poem?
Yes. Richard Strauss, yeah, he kept Beethoven's title Schwung. Oh, that's where it's called Frenzy. Yeah, that's right. The English translation of the Strauss song has it as Frenzy. Yeah, and the Strauss one is I love it. I mean, it's also kind of loud, but more, there's more nuances in it. And harmonically, it's typical Strauss, as you'll hear in a sec. But it has a very interesting thing, which I'll explain in a minute. Now, just make sure that my computer's not going to fall off again. Well, maybe it will, but whatever. It doesn't matter. Okay, anyway.
Okay, this I'm not going to...
I can't play it. Just got
amazing. Yeah, that's it's amazing, Edward, and well done for just chucking it out like that. These songs are just absolute thrilling to perform. And I remember, Edward, we did this Strauss. We did a whole Strauss concert in Zurich, in somewhere in the middle of Switzerland, not even in Zurich. And it was one of those situations. I drove from the UK. We did a big holiday around Switzerland and southern Germany, and tried to find this church for this random concert. And of course, my phone died, ran out of. I couldn't get any internet. So suddenly, having been so taken, when you take it for granted that your phone's going to just work, couldn't find this bloody place. And I drove to like a cow. I thought, well, you said it's a small church in this village, and I just drove around and around and around. I even stopped at what ended up being like an electricity generator building, thinking that was where our concert was. You don't remember this at all. And then we finally got to this concert hall, and there's a video on YouTube of us doing this concert somewhere. If you scout around for it. All Strauss, so we did Strauss Cello Sonata, Strauss Lieder, and we did these songs as well. But all I remember about this concert was that there was about 20 people you could only fit 20 people in this tiny church. And they had 4 Scheinwerfer, spotlights, right in front of, and I was just dying, just like dripping sweat. I don't remember anything about the music. I just remember feeling like I can't breathe, it's too hot, and I'm being roasted here under these lights. And that was the last time I performed these songs with you. Totally not relevant, but
yeah, no, but nice. Yeah, I remember that concert very well. Actually, it was a really good concert. Anyway, but I just wanted to say something briefly about the Strauss's setting, because there's this interesting bit. There's a sort of musical refrain in it, and this does have to do with Ullmann. So hang on a sec, bear with me. You might have heard me trying to play this passage a minute ago. That music comes back 3 times. That was in C sharp major, then it comes in E major, and at the end of the piece, it comes in A major. So it's all about thirds, and it's all about very, very sharp major keys. But this weird harmony. And you think, well, that's kind of typical Strauss. He does stuff like that a lot. But if you add it all up together and you find out what scale he's using there, it's maybe, and I don't know exactly if you intended this, but it sort of sounds a bit like he's invented, it's an 8-note scale, actually, that's an interesting combination of semitones and minor thirds, or let's call them augmented seconds. So it's the scale he uses is actually this. Let me get this right. So you have, there were 2 augmented seconds in there, and the rest is semitones. So that's a very strange kind of exotic sort of scale that he's invented. Well done. Yeah. A bit down a bit, left a bit. That's it. There. That's the E major. Something like that. Yeah. So I thought that was quite interesting, because he sort of put in a little bit of an exotic scale in there, which Ullmann does not do. And I don't know if you recognized any of what we played earlier when we sang through the whole song, but I think this reflects back on what Simon was saying earlier about Ullmann's musical apprenticeship under Schoenberg and his young adulthood when he went back to Prague to conduct, but also to study with Zemlinsky. And I think that Zemlinsky is probably the composer whose musical language is most like Ullmann. You probably recognize very Zemlinsky-ish sort of harmonies. Very thick, compound tonal harmonies, sort of piles of thirds, sort of, what do you call it, sort of hypertonal sort of sounds. But since we're talking about Strauss as well, Ullmann at the end of this song, and I think for the only time in the whole cycle of 4 half-ist songs, goes Strauss. He does a massive kind of Strauss paraphrase at the place where it says, und Gesang erschalle und dringe zu den tanzenden Sphären auf. And I'll just play it slightly in slow motion, so we get a taste of it. Und Gesang. So you have that, the sort of a waltz, isn't it? It's the dancing, the song ascending up to the stars, to the dancing spheres in a crazy waltz that is higher and higher and higher as the bass gets lower and lower and lower. So you have this expansion, and I know it totally reminds me of Richard Strauss because of all his waltzes, the end of Elektra, for example, or similar. Yeah, obviously it wasn't Cavalier and all kinds of stuff. Let me just do that again, the waltz bit in slow motion. And then the postlude of the song again is a waltz. And just for the very last flourish, he goes back to the duple time of the opening of the song. Yeah, so I think there's a little homage to Strauss there at the end of that song.
So I think we're going to have to start to wind up today's show. Just to say that in the comments, and I think in the description on the YouTube, you should get now a link to our recording, not the one you've just heard, but an actual professional one with normal, like actual microphones that we did for Nimbus Records. And what Nimbus did, and I think it's really amazing how they've done it, that instead of having individual songs on individual tracks, they've put the whole group together. So the whole group of the there's a CD there, so you can look out for that. You can buy it. You can buy the CD on my website here. And again, if you want to make sure that you can also send some money to DigitalLiederSalon using PayPal, but definitely do get hold of this CD because there's some amazing stuff on it. Anyway, yeah, so the link in the comments or in the description of this video, you can hear it for free, so don't even have to spend any money whatsoever. Thank you, YouTube.
Yeah, but that's right. The whole Liederbuch des Hafis is on one track.
That's what I was getting at. Yeah. So I'm reading all the comments and looking at you at the same time. Now here's some. Well, just any questions. We're going to quickly go through. Catherine Butler has written a lot of things. Thank you very much for your input. Can we have more Strauss another time? Terrific. Thank you. Yes, we can. Of course. And
we've only got one more, actually. We talked about this one. We talked about Huldigung. So the only other one we've got to do is Ihre Augen. But that's a lovely song, so we can talk about that. Yes, definitely.
Yeah, and we should actually get on and do some Zemlinsky songs as well, Edward. I think that we need to program Zemlinsky and Ullmann would be a really nice
that would be good,
program. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching. I think Simon meant just his date, says Julian Rushton. Your dad?
Yeah, that's my dad. Sure. Hi,
Dad. The dates are Viktor Ullmann, 1898, 1944. So an amazing, amazing artist and composer and performer whose life...
I think it's also worth mentioning that when he was in Terezin, he wrote tons and tons of music. Of all the composers that we know that were there, were working and writing, he was just incredibly prolific.
He was prolific because he was lucky insofar as he was able to not have to be doing any manual labor, which everybody else had to do. So he was exempt, possibly because he was a bit older, but also because of his, he was exempt and he was very, very busy. also, unlike everybody else, he actually was able to have a little room, or a cupboard probably, to work on his own. So he had space and privacy, which is two things that people did not have in order to actually write some of his things. And some famously, of course, Kaiser von Atlantis, the Kaiser of Atlantis, which was an opera that was written but never performed in Terezin. There's so much to explore. Maybe we should save this for another episode.
Well, there are I know we have to wrap it up for now, but we do have other songs by Ullmann on our CD, two Chinese songs, which were composed in Terezin to Chinese poetry, translated not by Bethke but by Klabund. And they are very, very interesting songs, very short, very compact. So it would be lovely to talk about those as well. And then we can talk about more about his Terezin time.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Because also, we're lucky that we have anything survived from what he wrote in Terezin. It's just because that he entrusted a suitcase full of music before he was deported to Auschwitz. He gave it to the poet Hans Adler, who also wrote the lyrics for another group of songs, and who survived and took them to England, and here we are. So there you are. Look, there's so much underneath these songs, and we were thrilled that we could mix him up with other composers, Middle European composers like Strauss, and also Gottfried von Einem and whoever else. Have a look on the YouTube video, Pavel Haas. Have a look on the YouTube video. We also did a kind of introduction film about that album, which is worth, if you're interested. Many thanks for the information. Hans Gaal. Yeah, we'll talk about Hans Gaal.
Yeah,
definitely. Okay. All right, guys. Well, it's great that you're also engaged. Please stay in touch with
fantastic.
us. Definitely, please subscribe to YouTube, to our YouTube channel, and Edward Russian has some wonderful videos on his as well. And there you go. Should we say goodbye, Edward?
I want to say goodbye, and thanks for watching, and spread the word. Tell all your friends about us, because it's great fun doing these videos, and we have great feedback, so I think it's a worthwhile thing. And so we want to go viral.
Edward, I can't wait. Our first concert that we'll do together, let's live stream it on DigitalLiederSalon.
Oh, yeah.
Let's do that. See that from your cellar. Okay.
Okay.
Goodbye,
everybody.
Stay safe, everybody, and wherever you are, don't fall over or catch any horrible diseases. Okay. Goodbye.